What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Believe in Kentucky podcast brought to you by the Believe Podcast Network. If you haven't subscribed, rated, reviewed, go ahead and do all that. We definitely appreciate it. Alongside Cole Park from the Cat's Paws, my name is Vinny Hardy. And Cole, we are inching ever so closer to August 30th. Only 3 Saturdays left without Kentucky football.
Yes, it's getting there. It's getting there. We had a media day on Friday, had fan day on Saturday. Plenty of fans got to come down and see the Cats, in action before they're actually in action on the 30th against Toledo. But still quite a bit away. Feels like we're right around the corner, but not quite. I'm sure these next 3 weeks are going to be long, but gives us some time to square stuff away and get ready for the season to start. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see them take the field against Toledo. Excited to see what a new season's going to bring, and we're so close. We're in the right month, so.
Exactly. So a lot of fans and even media are kind of in wait and see mode, or the Cats are going to have to show me, coming off a 4-8 season, the skepticism is there. So for the fans that turned out for fan day, was it optimism, was it excitement? What was the vibe among the BBN that was at Kroger Field this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a lot of fun. People generally had fun. I wrote about 2,600 words breaking down my takeaways from that position group and a bunch of takeaways. We can go over some of that today. But I think generally there was a lot of optimism. Mark Stoops seemed really there she goes. Mark Stoops seemed really pleased with everything. He was in good spirits. He voluntarily did media. We weren't. The email initially said no media after fan day, and Mark Stoops said, "I'll give you guys something. I'll talk to you for a little bit after." So he was in good spirits. The other coaches seemed in good spirits. The players seemed pretty happy. They got to go over there and talk to BBN, take some photos, give some hugs after the practice. So I think it was a lot of fun. Generally non-contact for fan day. There were a couple hits there that got the fans able to kind of make some noise. People wanted to put on a show for BBN in attendance, and there were a few really impressive catches as well. One that I wrote about that really stuck out, Cutter Boley had just this gorgeous pass into double coverage, way downfield. I wrote it down here. Let me go get this. I think it was to I'm blanking. DJ Miller is who he completed that to. It was a beautiful pass, threaded perfectly into double coverage, and Miller brought it down. He had a drop or so earlier on in the fan day, but he really made up for it that play, and that was one that people were happy about. People were celebrating, and it seemed like all around a good time. I got a little bit of sun, as you can see here on that day, but it was a nice time. So I thought it was a really good fan day, and Stoops seemed really, really pleased with where the team is at this point. He said we're a lot further along this fan day as opposed to others. He really credited a lot of the summer workouts to being able to do that, but the team is looking along like they're coming along a lot better, and everyone kind of seemed to have left pretty pleased with how things went.
Yeah. So, and he initially, spoke on Monday because he was getting the procedure done. Didn't want everybody to see his, the face and the, so was he bandaged up? Sunglasses? Was he, or did he just come out? Okay.
He cracked a joke about it at the start of the media session. Someone asked him about his sunglasses. He made a joke about it. Said he's not quite collecting them. He just grabs whatever pair he's got. But he had a pretty nice pair of sunglasses on over there. So he had that on during the interviews. But nothing too long, nothing too crazy. But he seemed pretty pleased. Talked with us for a little while, gave us some insight, and wrote about a lot of that. And we could talk about a lot of that today.
Yeah, for sure. And initially when he said I'll talk on Mondays because I won't be here Friday. I'm with all the motivated stuff online and him saying he's grateful, I was like, man, just lean into it. Come in bandaged up, come in bleeding like Tyler Hughes from the Louisville game, and just show everybody how motivated you are, and you're grateful to be alive. I've drugged myself here, bleeding after surgeries, post-op Stoops. I'm like, man, just show everybody how motivated you really are. But because that had a life of its own online, man. But
yeah, I mean, he talked about that a little bit on Monday. Someone asked, I forget what the exact question was that spurred this answer. I don't think it was related to his media appearances necessarily, but he said, I'm not ducking away from anything. We know what last season was. We know what we need to do this season, but I'm not ducking away from anything. I'm not doing any less media than I've ever done. I'm still going to be out here. I'm still going to face the music for anything that goes wrong and be here to celebrate everything that goes right. And, I'll be here right in front of you guys every time. And, initially, yeah, he said I probably might not be there, after his little procedure on media day and on Friday. And, Mitch Barnhart spoke on Friday. We have a lot of really interesting stuff we could talk about from that. That was a lengthy press conference. And we got both coordinators and then the players. But, Saturday fan day, Stoops came out there and, like I said, voluntarily came out to the media, offered to do media, answer our questions, and seemed like he was in really high spirits. So I think if nothing else, this is probably the most positive. I've only been covering this team for 4 years, so I wasn't, and I didn't really cover football much as a freshman, kind of how it goes. That would have been the 10-win season that's now in the void somewhere, have the NCAA record books. But so this is probably the most pleased I've seen him, especially this early, and he seems really, really, I don't want to say motivated. I know it's a fun thing online. Somewhat internally, it's in the program, it's regarded, but he seems very optimistic and very ready to get things going. Really pleased with where the team's at right now. Really pleased with the potential that this group has, and really excited to get the games going, I think.
Yeah, and as far as let's say, I had but like to talk about Mitch and all that too. But he said he was pleased too. I had a thought; it just left my mind. It'll hit me again. But yeah, we can talk about Mitch or Stoops, like you said. Like you said, you wrote the 2,600 words at thecatspaws.com. If y'all aren't following Cole there, definitely do so. But yeah, man, just dive in wherever you want to go about Mitch. I'll see if I can get that Mark thought back.
For sure. My 2,600 words were about fan day. I wrote a separate 1,300 words about everything Mitch said, and that's not even going over everything he said. He spoke a lot. This was really a lot of our first chance to talk to Mitch Barnhart with everything that's changed in college athletics. So I would say a lot of there were a lot of other questions asked. I jotted down a few answers here that I thought stuck out to me that weren't about this topic, but most of what he talked about was revenue sharing, the settlement, and how Kentucky is going to be affected by that. So I went into a lot of that in a story for the Cat's Paws, and some stuff. He's Mitch Barnhart, not going to get flat out answers on certain things. He's going to say a lot of words, and sometimes not all those words will mean a whole lot. You know how it is. Political. Got to do what you got to do when you're up there. But he did give a lot of really interesting insights into that. Did refuse to give, we had that 45% figure for basketball, refused to give any inference on that, did not give a number. He said, I'm sure our fans do want to know, our opponents want to know too. So they want to keep that a competitive advantage. But something that he did say is, while he refused to give like a hard number for someone asked him okay, so for football and basketball, is there a number you're not willing to go below? And he wouldn't really say yes or no on that. But what he said is that Kentucky's going to try to keep it fluid. So I think a lot of schools are going to do that. But, for some people, I think when they saw this, okay, well, this percentage is going to go to this sport, this percentage this sport, and that's just how it's going to work. Kentucky, what Mitch said is, we're going to assess it year to year. He said maybe going into one season, he said it's going to depend on who you've got on your roster, who's on staff, what's going on with the coaches, where's the team at, what are the expectations. He's like, maybe one year this team won't need as much as it did last year. Maybe it'll need more than it did last year. And we're going to try to assess that on a season-by-season basis and see which one of our programs need what and how we can best support them. Because, someone asked about Oklahoma. Oklahoma came out and was pretty blunt about it. They said, listen, we've got 6 different sports that we're going to be dividing revenue sharing between, and it's not going to be just football and basketball the way some schools are going to mostly go. And, Mitch said that too.
Yep.
You hear a lot about everything schools and Texas and all these schools, but Kentucky really is in that conversation too. You can say that certain sports have kind of struggled, but across the board from the really big revenue sports to some of the smaller sports people don't even know. I mean, our men's tennis team was in the finals a few years ago.
Yep.
So across the board, Kentucky's really talented. And Mitch Barnhart said that Kentucky's in that same boat. There are 6 different sports that they're really, really looking at doing revenue sharing with. Obviously, you have both the basketballs, you got football, and then he threw baseball, softball, and volleyball into that conversation as well. National title winning volleyball team. Baseball's been competing in the SEC, going to tournaments, went to Omaha for the first time. Softball's been pretty consistent under Rachel Lawson, consistently going to the NCAA tournament and doing that. So, he made it pretty clear that just because there's a new era does not mean that we're not willing to keep up with what we have been doing and trying to compete across the board. He also said that Kentucky's not looking at cutting any sports. even if certain programs aren't going to be getting really revenue sharing, he said, we're not looking at getting rid of any programs. We want to keep all, I think, 23 of the sports Kentucky has on this campus and keep trying to compete with them at the best level we can. Giving shout outs to both soccer coaches, both getting ready to start their season with that being a fall sport and some of those other sports as well. But I thought that was notable, a lot of that about how it's going to be beneficial, but in a year-to-year basis, it's going to be very, very fluid. He mentioned that something that I wasn't previously aware of is that scholarships are included in that $20.5 million that you're given every year. So in actuality, you're not working with $20.5 million, you're working with more something like $18 million because 2.5 are set aside by default for scholarships. He talked about an interesting case in baseball where Nick Mingione was talking to his team and said something along the lines of, you guys are going to be getting it in different ways. Some of you guys are going to be on full scholarships. Some of you guys aren't, and maybe you'll get some more of that revenue sharing kind of coming your way. But we're going to balance it out to where we can help our team the best way we can with what we have and try to manage that. He talked about a lot of things on revenue sharing, from if it's going to have a political solution, even brought up someone asked him about the kind of the boogeyman in the closet that a lot of people, I think, in college sports are worried about. Like at what point do you just say, let's just try to have a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement, the way that the pros have. And, he talked about that a little bit. There's a whole bunch of stuff he talked about in there, and a whole bunch of it that probably bore some people to tears, but a whole bunch of it, if it's something you really care about, then you can go and read that and check it out and get the full list of everything he said. I quoted him word for word in that story. So it's pretty much just a list of everything he said about revenue sharing. I did pull a few other interesting comments from Mitch, not about revenue sharing, that I found interesting. Someone asked him about the 8-9 debate in the SEC right now. Pretty much straight up said, as far as I'm concerned, we're still pushing for 8. The way Kentucky's kind of scheduled a lot of it's all the time, really. Kentucky usually has 8 SEC opponents, 2 MAC schools, 1 FCS school, and then Louisville. And he kind of made the point, a lot of fans around the league or other leagues, the ACC's been firing some shots, the Big Ten's been firing some shots, like you really need an FCS school. But something Barnhart kind of pointed out that you can agree if you want to, you can disagree, call it a little bit lame that the SEC schools are scheduling FCS schools. But what he pointed out too is it's hard when you have 9 SEC games to guarantee a set amount of home games. And especially as you're in the revenue sharing era, you need home games, you need ticket sales, you need concession sales. And, you want to have as many home games as possible. And Kentucky usually tries to balance it out where over half their schedule is at home. So that way season ticket packages are worth it. You can get that in there. And, he didn't say this, but some of those FCS schools, let's be honest, when you're scheduling home games, you want to try to schedule as many home wins as possible because you want to keep fans in those seats, have them coming in here and seeing games they want to see and see Kentucky do well. It doesn't really do you a whole lot if they come in and see Kentucky lose a lot. We all know that famous photo from before Stoops got here when that stadium was very, very empty. And then the only other thing I really pulled out here to super highlight, someone asked him, for Mitch Barnhart, what does a successful football season look like to you this year? And he kind of tiptoed around some of it. He said the team seems very locked in. But what really stuck out to me, he said, I'm not going to say a certain number of wins. And this is a quote. He said, we've been in a place where, we've embraced our coaches. We have longevity within our coaches. We've never overreacted to things. Maybe that's something people don't like about me, but I don't really care right now. So I think that there's a very clear message that's being sent with that. Wins and losses. He said the team needs to be better. That's an obvious fact. Everyone knows that. Stoops would say that. The players would say they have to be better than last year. Last year was a disaster. But he didn't say, we don't need to get this many wins. We don't necessarily need to get this, that, or the other. It just needs to be better. It needs to be more bought in. The players need to respond, and they need to face adversity better. And, he really touched on, I think after last season, you saw a lot of people the same way they kind of turned on Calipari, start turning on Stoops and saying, we need to get rid of Stoops. It's over. But Mitch Barnhart made it pretty clear. He said, we don't overreact to things. And maybe that's something that's not popular, but that's who he is. And you can respect that or you cannot. There's been times where Kentucky's done both. There was a time where people said Nick Mingione should get fired, and then Stoops kind of bet on him. And then now they're going to tournaments every year. They went to Omaha for the first time. That's clearly turned around. On the other hand, wasn't a whole lot of trust given to Billy Gillespie. He was out in 2 years. Kyra Elzy, Some argued she should have been fired sooner. Still fired relatively quickly. Joker Phillips didn't last too long here. Still, some people said longer than they should have. But regardless, Barnhart has a tendency and a history of, apart from maybe Gillespie, offering that longer
He
leash.
he did it to himself. I mean, all the stuff you heard around his tenure and
Yeah.
the practice habits and the radical whatever, it's just. I mean, if you're gonna do that, you better win. And he
Yeah.
wasn't winning, and
He was
so
not. He was
you know,
not. He was doing a lot of things, but winning was not one of them.
yeah, and Joker and Kyra, they both probably bought themselves a year. I mean, if Joker doesn't beat Tennessee, I don't think he makes it to the next year. I mean,
Probably not. Kyra Elsie doesn't get those SEC tournament wins. They probably
exactly.
don't.
We went to every Kentucky Tennessee game starting like 04 because we're like we're gonna be there when we finally end this dreadful streak. So you go to Knoxville, get blown out, have a close game in Lexington. Every year we were there. And so in 2011, we stormed the field, myself, my dad, my sister, and hopping over the fence, I said to the people around us, I said, y'all know this means another year Joker, right? And we all paused and we're like, well, let's go run on the field.
I wasn't at Kentucky during the Joker Phillips era, but I remember, working at the Colonel, we covered every sport, and those SEC tournament games, I texted our women's basketball guy, and I was like, so this means another year of Kyra Elsie, right? Like that's what this means. She just bought herself another year. And yeah. I think it's something that you can dislike, I suppose, about Kentucky's athletic director, but it's also something I think that is worthy of some respect in the sense that I think he sees the best in a lot of people. And reading between the lines a little bit, the Tennessee win or those SEC tournament wins showed potential that things could be better. And that bought him another year until it was clear that things weren't going to get better. Yeah. But in the case of Nick Mingione, there was something there that kind of showed, hey, there's potential here. It's just not working out yet. And then it did. Kentucky goes to Omaha for the first time ever. They've been consistently a really good team. They were ranked like number 1 for a little while that season, I think, too. So I think that, reading between the lines of what his answer was in terms of what defines a successful Kentucky football season, I think what he's really looking for is, are there signs here that there's a puzzle? Do we have the pieces to connect a puzzle again? And that's what he's looking for. Are there signs that this can get back to where it was and even beyond that in the new era of college football playoffs where more teams make it? It's not just being pretty much undefeated if you're an SEC team or SEC champion. So I think, that's an answer that's going to frustrate some people, especially those people that are frustrated with football right now. And some of that's just holdovers from last year. They say winning cures all. Kentucky football comes out and wins a few big games this next year with that schedule. People are going to be right back in the camp. But Barnhart pretty much said he's looking for signs that this team has improved. He's looking for signs that this team can get it back together and that this rebuild, if you want to call it that, has legs to stand on.
Mm-hmm. So if you have a better showing all around body of work, more wins or not.
To adversity, the way you can't have players giving up again.
Yeah, whether it means more wins or not, if you just look better and look like you got stuff restored and head in the right direction, this can kind of maybe springboard you into where you want to be next year. So
I mean, and I understand that fully. I know that's frustrating to some people. That's kind of I said I forget where I said it, but Kentucky football could be better in every single facet this season and still have the same record just because they're facing a top 10 schedule in college football. I mean, you look at that schedule and it is brutal. And even the games that are gimme games aren't. I mean, you can mock them all you want to. Toledo has favorited to win the MAC right now. They could easily win the MAC, and then everyone knows what happens if some dice fall the right way and the top G5 champion turns out to be the MAC champion Toledo. Who knows? You could be facing a playoff team week 1 in the form of Toledo if they win the MAC and certain things fall their way. And I think that it's brutal schedule, and I think that they will get more than 4 wins realistically. I do. But I do think that some people are just going to look at wins, losses, and not really see the full scope of things. And Barnhart kind of seemed to emphasize that that's not what he's going to be doing as an athletic director, and he's going to be looking at kind of the more sum of all the pieces, not just the wins losses.
Yeah, he's gonna play the long game. He's gonna look at the more bigger picture, broader scope, and that's he's not getting caught up in the up to the moment, so consumed by the present that he's not surveying the whole scene. And that's kind of the way that's his jam. That's how he's been
Yeah.
for the 2 decades that he's been the AD. So and we all know more than likely the the Toledo game is going to be a game going to the fourth quarter. It's going to be a way too
Probably. Yes.
close for comfort, and that's
Those
just
MAC games tend to be. Hey, the MAC, people can say what they want to them. The MAC is a sneaky conference. Those teams
yeah,
will punch you. They might go down at the end, but they will punch you in the mouth. They're going to land a few jabs. You're not going to knock them out the way you knock out FCS schools most of the time.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the MAC is a gritty conference. That's what they're built on. So,
Well, we blew out Southern Miss last year, but the tendency for opening day blowouts, we're not. That's just not what Kentucky does. It just don't. It's not 68-3 and that kind of thing like you see in a lot of these week 0 games. But if they beat a team favored to win the MAC, you beat Ole Miss last year, so that and only won one game after that, which is insane. But if we'll learn a lot after these first 2 weeks.
I also want it on the record. My prediction is that Kentucky will beat Toledo. I am not implying that Toledo is going to come in here and upset Kentucky. I'm just saying people need to not just scoff at that game and go ahead and look at week 2 Ole Miss. I'm thinking it's going to be more of a game. I think Kentucky will still win it. They usually do against these MAC schools. I'm just saying it might be more of a game, and Toledo might be more of a heavy hitter than people are giving them credit for. Kentucky should still beat Toledo week 1. Do not fret on that.
We'll hear all that game week and the week before that about how good they are. They'll get talked up, and it won't be coach speak. And even those in the media like yourself will try to let everybody know in the previews that this team's pretty solid. This is not just a what the cat drug in type of team that you can just dominate easily. So, but everybody will still probably be up in arms when it's 27-17 in the fourth quarter and they're driving, whatever.
I was talking to somebody, I'm not going to say who, but I was talking to another media member on the sideline at Fan Day, and we literally said that, they were talking about the Toledo game, and he was telling me, he's like, I just, if you want me to give you my honest opinion, I think it's going to be like 20-18 going to the fourth quarter. Maybe Kentucky gets a late touchdown or two, but it's going to be a lot closer, and it's going to be a battle till the very end, and people aren't going to like it. People are going to feel pessimistic, and then it's going to turn out to be the same way it always is. That's how it goes. Week 1 against a MAC school, especially a good one. I think it is going to be probably a 1-score game going into the fourth quarter. I could see Kentucky getting 1 or 2 touchdowns there to kind of separate it by the final score, but it's going to be one of those games that you leave feeling good about, but not too good about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we've seen the history. We've seen this movie a time or two, and be surprised if this one plays out any different.
Right. I mean, you recognize patterns. We're human beings are pattern-seeking individuals, so you got to notice those patterns. But Friday was a lot of fun. I wouldn't say fun, but it was interesting talking to both coordinators, talking to Barnhart, talking to some of the players, and getting their insights into stuff. But the real kind of the meat and potatoes here came on Saturday, Fan Day. We got to actually see the Wildcats on the field, see some of those plays, see who was stepping out there, and I had a lot of thoughts. If you want to, we can go ahead and dive into some of that Fan Day stuff, how the team's looking, who's sticking out, all that stuff.
Yeah. How much were y'all able to see and all that good stuff? Yeah,
absolutely. So I think the nature of a Fan Day with a limited contact practice, certain groups are going to be able to shine where certain aren't. So I kind of touched on it a little bit in my piece, but we didn't really see a whole lot from the running backs. You're just not going to. If you're blowing the whistle on first contact, you're not seeing who's able to fight through contact, who's able to really force those gaps. It's just not a practice designed to really highlight the running backs. We still heard that Seth McGowan, Dante Dowdell, those guys are going to be the heart of that running back group. We saw a little bit of Jamarian Wilcox there, some of Patterson, but didn't get to see a whole lot of them. And it's also hard to really gauge the offensive, defensive lines. I can tell you that Khalil Saunders looks like an animal already getting in the backfield, but There were no sacks allowed. You can't sack the quarterback in a limited contact practice, so we can't really see for sure how they're going to get it. It's just kind of, can they get in the backfield right now? And the offensive line, you're doing your best, but you also can't go all out. So I didn't have a ton of takeaways from those two groups personally. I will say Jagger Burton looks significantly improved at center. He's kind of lining up there in center with the first team this year. We all know how that went a few years ago, but he looks a lot better. And Stoops kind of praised him as well. Says my office overlooks the practice field, and we'll get done with practice. And 45 minutes after practice is over, Jagger's back out there practicing snaps.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows. I didn't notice a single bad snap from Jagger Burton on Fan Day, and it's already this early. So I think he's really kind of embracing that role, recognizing where it went wrong, and looking to do that. The line looked pretty solid, albeit with limited play. But the groups that I think you really got to see a lot of in this kind of practice session are going to be your DBs, your wide receivers, and your quarterbacks, right? We saw a lot of the quarterbacks. Zach Calzada gives me a little bit of a, don't anybody overreact to this, but a little bit of a Will Levis in the sense of how hard he throws the ball. He's got some missiles he's throwing out there, and some of those short passes. It makes me a little bit nervous at times, but as the wide receivers get more comfortable, it's going to not really be an issue the same way it was for Levis. So he looks pretty solid, tended to make the right read, I would say, most of the time. A lot of safe reads too. Cutter Boley, I think the biggest thing we can say about Cutter Boley is that Kentucky is committed to developing Cutter Boley, and he is developing. There were a few times there, coming in as a redshirt freshman, there were a few times you're like, I don't really like the way that looked. I wish, he could have done that differently. But overall, he also had some plays you're like, this kid is fantastic. He could really be something here. And I talked about the pass to DJ Miller. He had a few others that were really, really impressive. I still think the best thrown ball of the day came from Zach Calzada. He had this one, Willie Rodriguez, down pretty deep in the pretty deep downfield, guarded pretty heavily, and Calzada throws this ball just perfectly. He recognizes that Willie's the bigger guy in this matchup to where Willie can jump up and get it, and it's honestly perfectly placed where he needed it, like where the DB couldn't get to it, but Rodriguez could and was able to comfortably bring that down. I would say that was one of the catches of the day. Apart from that DJ Miller one, that was just fantastic to see. Mm-hmm. But the group that really impressed me the most was the wide receivers. I think the wide receivers looked phenomenal on Fan Day, and that was with some limited work. Alabama transfer Kendrick Law was not there. Stoops said nothing to be concerned about. He should be back Monday, which is today at the time we're recording this episode. So should be back in practice today, and he said it was not an injury, nothing like that. He just said, the wide receivers, they're running so much, they're going all out of the time. Sometimes you just get a little tired. Sometimes you just want to take precautions with things. We don't want to handicap ourselves before we get into something. So seemed to not really be concerned about that, but he should be back today. But the wide receivers who were in action looked phenomenal. Jamari Macklin, I think he's going to be special. He made some phenomenal catches. His hands are looking really, really good. He had some shiny silver cleats on there, easy to stick out in a crowd. Hardly Gilmore looked really good. He was running with the twos for most of this practice, but he was making some phenomenal catches. In terms of punt return, it was looking like they're kind of leaning more Jamori again and Hardly Gilmore for that. They tried out Troy Stellato there too. Stellato also looks solid, doing a lot there. And even the guys who didn't really have as much of a chance to show off what they could do. Ashton Cozart had this one play where, he ended up tangling up with a DB, one of those situations where the DB and the wide receiver comes down with the ball and they're both trying to wrestle for it, and Cozart came up with it. So that was a bit of toughness there. He was mostly running with the threes, I believe. But one guy who I think really stuck out to me that I would like to highlight was Montaven Quisenberry. This guy, West Virginia commit, flips to Kentucky, freshman out of Royal County.
Yeah.
I think this guy can be really special. I was doing some work on him and pulled this quote from his coach after, they got a pretty big upset at Bowl County. He said, it kind of messes you up. Some people don't offer him because he's little or he's this, but he is the best football player in the state of Kentucky. And I think he's genuinely one of the top 100 players in the country. And, obviously your coach is going to say that about you. He's trying to get you recruited, but he looked really, really good. I have to say he looked really, really good. And, Stoops also kind of highlighted him a little bit, talked about him, said that he's doing really well. He's continuing to develop, and, even talked about a play we didn't get to see. That was in a practice that media wasn't allowed at, where he made this really, really impressive deep ball. And I thought Kisenberry even looked good in spring ball earlier this year, and he continued to impress. He's got strong hands. He can track the ball really well. That's something Stoops credited him for. Being able to kind of go hunt down that ball, even if it's not placed perfectly. And as a freshman, I thought it was really impressive the way he was going against some of these older defenders. These guys who are
Yeah.
bigger than him, stronger than him, and not showing
Hmm.
any kind of wear and tear. Fighting for it, getting that going. Stoops said, "quote He's a good, solid player. He's a good young player. I think he's going to get better with every rep, every opportunity." A couple of days ago, he caught a deep ball. He tracks the ball really well. He's got really good ball skills, and he's going to continue to get better. I think that as we get into this season, freshmen and in college football, it's always a question mark. But Quisenberry is one that I could see easily playing solid time this season and being a real contributor for the Wildcats as a freshman.
And Macklin's been around, and he was talking about just the speed of the room.
Yeah.
The total team speed that the guys have. And says he can't run like that anymore. But there's a lot of guys with some jets in there, so that's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wrote about it in my breakdown, and I try not to shy away from pros and cons, but I also try to highlight that it's fan day. We're in the first week of fall camp.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be some things that are a little bit rusty and not perfect. Some of the tight ends looks not on top of their game, but it's week one, and the game is still pretty much a month away at this point, a little less than a month away now. But there's time to get this going. There's time to get these players in their groove. But overall, there were a lot of positives. I thought that another pretty big positive worth noting, the defense looks pretty good. Stoops kind of highlighted a lot of the DBs there with JQ Hardaway, DJ Waller. He said, "I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, but our DBs could be really, really good this season." And they showed it. They have a lot of potential to be really, really good. I thought Alex Afari, still in his transition to linebacker, looks solid. A lot of those guys look really, really good. And like I highlighted Khalil Saunders there, he's looking like he could be a monster this year. It's just fan day. I don't want to overreact, but he was making some real good plays and had some pretty good explosiveness off the snap. So I think that I'm really excited to see what the defense can do. Brad White seems, again, I don't want to say motivated. I know the connotation that might have, but it might sound like I'm poking fun, but I'm not. Like, he seems really, eager to get back on things. He hopped on CJ Works there was a play that led to I think Cutter had to scramble on one play. The defense stopped him. It would have been a gain of 0. It was a good defensive play, and Brad White hopped on CJ Works he's like, "You're downfield. That's the wrong read. You need to be up here." And the defense stopped anyway. But it's those little things that he's really harping on right now. And I think that as we get closer to the season, and hopefully once the season starts, that Kentucky's defense could be back to where it should be, back to where it was before, where it was a genuine threat on every possession.
And you mentioned the DBs who will probably have to maybe carry the weight more until everybody on the front end kind of acclimates and gets up to speed. And all that stuff fluctuates from year to year. Next year it could be the opposite. The D line is carrying the weight to help to the back end. But you think about Ryan Nichols at Ole Miss, thrown out there, just making plays, holding his own. He's got that experience. He can file that away. That he was able to go out there and compete on the road against a top tier SEC team. Top tier receivers. Talked with Coach Collins before, and he talks about they constantly put him in bad situations on purpose to where, in practice they can get through that adversity, which has been a struggle. But, you in a bind, how do you handle it? How do you respond when the bullets are flying in a real game? Hey, I've been through this. He can go call back the plays he made down there at Oxford when it gets tough this season against Ole Miss or at Auburn or whatever, because their receivers are supposed to be legit. So the DBs probably will shoulder a lot of the load until the rest of the defense gets up to speed, and you gotta do what you gotta do with the linebackers, and maybe the kid from Marshall can step up and be the thumper that you need, but or maybe you kind of mask and do some smoke and mirrors. Brad White's been at the NFL before, and they'll bring everybody along. Like you said, they're still a month away, and but the DBs might have to shoulder it until everybody else catches up.
Well, I think something that's really special about this group that Stoops highlighted on too is how much experience this group has. You've got a lot of pretty experienced transfers coming into this program that have played that. And, Muhammad Ali, I believe, said that everyone's got a plan to get punched in the mouth. You can say, oh, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. But until you're in that scenario, like you said, the bullets flying, you don't really know what you're going to do. So a lot of these guys have been there. They've been in those shootouts. They know what to do. And I think that that's something that's really, really notable about this group. And I also think this group is going to be really interesting to see the way they come together, the way they're built, and it's obvious after last year that you needed a change in the way the team was built, but you've got a wide receiver room that's not built around Dane Key and Barryon Brown anymore. They're built around the new guys. You got a defensive line group that's not built around Deion Walker, around Octavius Oxendine. He's in Canada now, I think, with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, I believe their name is.
Yeah, that's right.
Still thought an NFL team should have given him a shot, but you're having, and in a lot of ways, you're losing a lot of these big names. People get concerned. They're like, Dane's gone, Barryon's gone, Ox is gone, Deion Walker's gone. But at the same time, the team last year was kind of built around these guys, and whether it was their fault or not, the team didn't live up to its standards that it needed to. So you've got a new team that is built around new guys, and you can kind of see how that culture starts to develop. We've talked about that a lot on this show as we try to march through this off season before we can actually get to the games. We don't talk about culture anymore all the time, hopefully. But, as you build that culture and build that new team, I think it is important that the team is built around new people, that you have guys from last year who know what happened and want to improve upon it, but you also have groups that are built differently. They're built around new players with different mentalities, and they're built to work a certain way. And, I think that it kind of got unsung that, I do think it's a problem on some level that, you lose Barryon Brown and Dane Key, but at the same time, it was very clear that Kentucky's solution at wide receiver was to build around them.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, if that's not working, then you have to try something different. So I don't know that the wide receiver is going to be better. I don't know that Kentucky wouldn't be better with Dane Key and Barryon Brown this year, but I know last year they were 4-8. So if they're better this year and the wide receivers are looking good in fan day and they can kind of keep it up, maybe it's a blessing in disguise in some ways. I think that sports are weird that way. You have teams that will trade a guy and you're like, what are we doing? What is wrong with us? And then, you trade away your Luka Doncic and suddenly you've got the number 1 pick in Cooper Flag. No conspiracy theories. No conspiracy theories, but all I'm gonna say, that's as a fan, sometimes it works out that way. So you never know. It sucks to lose some of the guys Kentucky lost. They lost a lot of big names. You're losing Max Harrison in the DB group. You're losing Deion Walker. You're losing Dane Key, Barryon Brown. A lot of other guys who transferred. But it's possible that some of those losses are addition by subtraction in the sense that you're able to take a step back, see the full picture, and maybe you turn the canvas upside down. Maybe you're like, what, this doesn't look so bad. Maybe we actually do have a painting here, and we can put something together with a few little bushes here and there, and now we've got to work with it.
Exactly. So the next thing is, like you said, for everybody that's already seeming to be doing well, maintain it. For those that aren't quite up to speed, get them up to speed.
Absolutely.
And then it's, time to put the game plan in. And of course, while all that's going on, hope everybody stays healthy. You hope you don't have any big, breaking news. Oh man, that's a huge loss. Like Landon Young in the past, when guys that have gotten hurt in fall camp, and like, man, so get everybody through, maneuver and got everybody through, and get to week 1.
Actually, Mitch Barnhart said something about that very topic that did make me chuckle a little bit in the press conference. He said, when he was saying he's not going to base the season on wins and losses, he said, some people look at our schedule and say, well, that's a win, that's a win, that's a win. He's like, you don't know that. He said, you don't know who we're going to have for that game. You don't know who the personnel are going to be for that game. He said, you never know he said, obviously the FCS school should be a win, but I guess I'm not even going to wish into existence, but there's a scenario in which it might not be if certain things go really, really wrong. You've seen, like, I'm sure the New York Jets came in super optimistic, and then Aaron Rodgers goes down game 1. You're like, well, we're the Jets again. So, you never really know what's going to happen. You never really know. And the biggest thing is, if this group has the potential you think it does, can you keep them healthy and can you keep them together?
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. It's huge.
Because other teams are
Every,
going to have that problem too. Maybe, who's to say? Again, I don't want to wish anything into existence, but we're looking at the schedule right now. We're like, there's no way they beat Texas. God only something really rough could happen to Texas. They could have, a lot of their important starters out for that game, and then it's something like Kentucky should beat Texas.
mm-hmm.
At the same time, Kentucky could have a bunch of injuries, and you're like, well, maybe Vandy, probably not going to be Vandy. Whereas right now, I
Yeah,
think a lot of people are saying they should be Vandy. So every team in the sport's dealing with that, and it'll be interesting to see. But you can never really be sure until the week of the game and until you play the game. That's why they play the games, right? But
yeah.
keeping people healthy, keeping the roster together, responding to adversity, that's going to be the biggest thing for this Kentucky team, because if you can avoid injury issues, that's phenomenal. There's no way everyone on your schedule does. And we have
Oh,
seen teams, both football, basketball, you name the sport, torn apart by injury issues. So some of those games that we're looking at, there's no way they win it. Who's going to be available for that team that week?
mm-hmm.
Who's going to be available for Kentucky that week?
Yeah,
You don't really know until the week of the game. So
yeah.
there's a lot of potential, and there's a lot of opportunity. There's also a lot of opportunity for some stumbles and pitfalls if things don't go your way. But if things do go your way, there's a potential to have a really great season.
All the projections and everybody tries their best to be so accurate, and you can't predict what's going to happen in what moment, or who's coming off a bye week, or who's hurt, or who's just having
Even in the
culture
offseason,
chemistry issues that coaches monitor everything, but there's
yeah,
still so many things they cannot foresee or be prepared for, as
yeah,
prepared as they are.
and the offseason's somewhat that way too. I mean, look at the projections going into next season after last season ended. People are doing their way too early top 25s or who's going to
Yeah.
be good next year. Tennessee's quarterback holds out and then transfers to UCLA. They're in a completely different situation. Now Tennessee is not Tennessee anymore. They're in a whole new situation where they're like, who's going to be our quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
it's crazy in sports how quickly things can change like that. And that was something that Stoops emphasizes working on. He's like, a lot of these guys are looking good. Now we just got to work on having depth. We got to make sure we have depth there, because we cannot be the kind of team that one mistake or one error can derail this whole thing. So seems like something he's aware of. Seems like something that could be really good for the Cats if it goes their way this year. But ultimately, no matter how much we talk about it, we could sit here for 5 hours talking about the upcoming football season, and none of it could matter by the time the first game rolls around. So,
Yeah, that's how it is for sure. Getting back to Tennessee and Kentucky baseball, I always say to all the Vol fans, whether it needs to be said or not, I say it every chance I get, but Kentucky baseball made it to the College World Series before Tennessee basketball made it to a Final Four, and they hate that so much. It gets them so irked. But hey, it is what it is. So
there you go. It's true. It
yeah.
is a fact. I wrote about it a little bit last year for the Kernel. I did going into the SEC tournament. I did probably like a 5,000 word piece looking at every single team in the SEC and saying, like, what is your biggest question going into the SEC tournament? Some of them were kind of tongue in cheek. Some of them were a little bit having some fun with it. For example, I think for Texas, I said my question for Texas is, so who's going to be your next head coach? Because not Rodney Terry, and I like Rodney Terry, but he ended up out at Texas at the end of the year. Now they got Sean Miller, right? So
Yeah.
they got him out of Xavier. But regardless, my question for Tennessee was, SEC tournament doesn't matter. Are you finally going to make a Final Four this year? And they did not. So,
Still searching.
Rick Barnes, I have a lot of respect for Rick Barnes as a coach. I don't really know what he needs to do to get over that hump. It's hard to make a Final Four, but Tennessee, until they finally do, Kentucky fans will have ammunition till the end of time.
That's it. I was the same way with being a Cowboys fan with the Eagles until they finally won one. I'm like, look, this. That's like, you're in the most prestigious division in the history of the NFL. When it comes to Super Bowls, roughly 25% of all the Super Bowls are in the NFC East. You had 5 with the Cowboys, 4 with the Giants, 3 with Washington. That's 12. We're close to Super Bowl 60 now, 50, whatever, but it hovers around about 20%. And there, the Eagles, I said, y'all have contributed nothing. And this was before their first one. They finally got one.
They made you eat your words. Now they got 2 now.
They did. And so now I had to move the target. And I said, well, now you finally have multiple. Good for you.
Yeah.
But yeah. but yeah, they're the team I hate the most in the division. So it is. The NFC is full of hate, just like you in the AL East and in baseball, the hate that's just there. The sports hate, same way. Did your Red Sox buy? Were they aggressive? Did they do what you wanted to do before the trade deadline? How they handle that for
You
you?
know, it's a good thing I'm not a sports GM because no, they did not do what I wanted them to, and I will be darned if they're not doing way better right now. They just passed the Yankees at the top of the AL wild card, so I don't know why they're winning. I don't know how they're winning, but they are winning.
Yeah,
So I'll take it. I was sad that I had to get rid of my Rafael Devers jersey. The
yeah.
last jersey I had of a player that is still on the roster, I got the jersey of.
Uh,
I had bad luck with that. I got a couple Patriots Devin McCourty jerseys out of the league now. I got me a crazy story behind the Celtics jersey I had. I'm blanking on the name right now. That's a bit embarrassing. I have a jersey of him, but Carson Edwards. Carson
oh
Edwards. Out of all the Celtics jerseys you think I buy, you wouldn't think Carson Edwards. But I
no.
remember sitting in my hotel watching him drop like 40 in the NCAA tournament for Purdue, and I was like, I gotta get it. I don't think he's on the Celtics anymore. I think he went to
Yeah,
Germany to play basketball now. So
yeah. That
Rafi Devers was the only one I had left, and they got rid of him. But they're winning games now. They're above the Yankees, so I can rub it in the face of all my Yankees fan friends and be a lot better.
absolutely gotta enjoy every second of them being ahead in the standings for however long it lasts. Might last the rest of the season where the Yankees are going. So
We've kind of put giving them the belt as far as we've played them this year. The overall
mm,
series this season, Red Sox are on top.
there
So
you go. There you
you know,
go.
take
Enjoy it,
that,
man.
Aaron Gershon.
Yes, yes. And you can rub it in. We'll get him on here at some point, and he'll face the music again. And hey, not seeing any Yankees tweets from him here lately because it's just been kind of tough
A lot to tweet
times
about.
right now.
A
Tough
lot to tweet
times.
about, I suppose. I love it.
Well, we had the fun episode here, getting caught up on all the football content, and you were cranking out stories for the Cat's Paws. Fan Day, Stoops talked, Mitch Barnhart talked. No sports are going to be cut. That is good to hear. More baseball scholarships. I mean, like almost double the amount of scholarships.
Yeah.
So good stuff there. We're inching our way, Cole. We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. We're gonna get. We had pro football. We had the Hall of Fame game. So when you get past that one, then you keep on rolling, and college is right around the corner. So
I love. I just minor tangent. I love so much that unanimously, just around the country, we've kind of just accepted the Hall of Fame game as a. It doesn't really count, but it's close enough. So let's go football.
yes, exactly. Exactly. They're up there. Hey, it's Canton. It's the induction weekend.
Yeah.
There's NFL uniforms on the field. I mean, the players in those uniforms at that time, whatever. Hey, the
I've seen
tackle.
tweets. Everyone loves the music, the famous music. They said, close enough. Run the music. Get me turned up. Let's go.
That's right. That's right. Well, y'all stay with us and get turned up all season long here and Believe in Kentucky. Follow Cole Park at the Cat's Paws. All the content. Get the yearbook. Uh, Subscribe. Follow all of his stories there that he puts out. Rate and review our podcast here at Believe in Kentucky. We would definitely appreciate it. Tell your friends. Follow us on Twitter. We got the link tree in the profile, the TikTok, all the platforms there. Follow, subscribe, keep up with everything we do, all things UK. And for Cole Park, my name is Vinny Hardy. Go Cats, and we'll see y'all next time on Believe in Kentucky.